time comes in all men's lives when they decide what sort of men they are going to be, whether they are the kind that let other people tread on them or not. Maybe it was because Tom had put the blame on him for the theft in the carriage. Maybe it was the fire. Maybe it was the bogus insurance agent or the white shirts. Or maybe it was just enough now. There and then, it was as if someone had removed a fuse in Ove's mind. Everything in his eyes grew a shade darker. He walked out of the changing room, still naked and with water dripping from his flexing muscles. Walked to the bottom of the corridor to the foreman's changing room, kicked the door open and cleared the way through the astonished press of men inside. Tom was standing in front of a mirror at the far end, trimming his bush beard. Ove gripped him by the shoulder and roared so loudly that the sheet metal covered walls echoed. Give me back my watch. Tom, with a superior expression, looked down at his face. His dark figure towered over Ove like a shadow. I don't have your blood. Give it here. Ove bellowed before Tom had reached the end of the sentence, so fiercely that the other men in the room saw fit to move a little closer to their lockers. A second later, Tom's jacket had been ripped out of his hands with such power that he didn't even think of protesting. He just stood there like a punished child as Ove held out his wristwatch from the inside pocket. And then Ove hit him. Just once. It was enough. Tom collapsed like a sack of wet flour. By the time the heavy body hit the floor, Ove had already turned around and walked away. A time like that comes for all men when they choose what sort of man they want to be. And if you don't know the story, you don't know the man. Tom was taken to the hospital. Again and again he was asked what had happened, but Tom's eyes just flickered and he mumbled something about having slipped. And strangely enough, none of the other men who'd been in the changing rooms at the time had any recollection of what had happened. That was the last time Ove saw Tom, and he decided the last time he'd let anyone trick him. He kept his job as a night cleaner, but he gave up his job at the construction site. He no longer had a house to build, and anyway, he'd learned so much about construction by this point that the man in their heart has no longer had anything to teach him. They gave him a toolbox as a farewell present, this time with new bought tools. To the puppy, to help you build something that lasts, they'd written on the piece of paper. Ove had no immediate use for it, so he carried it about aimlessly for a few days. Finally, the old lady renting him a room took pity on him and started looking for things round the house for him to mend. It was more peaceful that way for both of them. Later that year, he enlisted for military service. He scored the highest possible mark for every physical test. The recruitment officer liked this taciturn young man who seemed as strong as a bear, and he pressed him to consider a career as a professional soldier. Ove thought it sounded good. Military personnel wore uniforms and followed the orders. All knew what they were doing, all had a function. Things had a place. Ove felt he could actually be good as a soldier. In fact, as he went down the stairs to have his obligatory medical examination, he felt lighter in his heart than he had for many years, as if he had been given a sudden purpose, a goal, something to be. His joy lasted no more than 10 minutes. The recruitment officer had said that the medical examination was a mere formality. But when the stethoscope was held against Ove's chest, something was heard that should not have been heard. He was sent to a doctor in the city. A week later, he was informed that he had a rare congenital heart condition. He was exempted from any further military service. Ove called and protested. He wrote letters. He went to 3 other doctors in the hope that a mistake had been made. It was no use. Rules are rules, said the white-shirted man in the army's administrative offices the last time Ove went there to try to overturn the decision. Ove was so disappointed that he did not even wait for the bus. Instead, he walked all the way back to the train station. He sat on the platform, more despondent than at any time since his father's death. A few months later, he would walk down that platform with the woman he was destined to marry. But at that precise moment, of course, he had no idea of this. He went back to his work as a night cleaner on the railways. He grew quieter than ever. The old lady whose room he rented eventually grew so tired of his gloomy face that she arranged for him to borrow a nearby garage. After all, the boy had that car he was always fiddling with, she said. Maybe he could keep himself entertained with all that. Ove took his entire stock to pieces in the garage the next morning. He cleaned all the parts and then put them together again to see if he could do it and to have something to do. When he was done with it, he sold the Saab at a profit and bought a newer but otherwise identical Saab 93. The first thing he did was to take it to pieces to see if he could manage it, and he could. His days passed like this, slow and methodical, and then one morning he saw her. She had brown hair and blue eyes and red shoes and a big yellow clasp in her hair. And then there was no more peace and quiet for Ove.